It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as we have more on WWE trying to sign CM Punk before his AEW debut. Another WWE contract is set to expire before the end of the year, and AEW President Tony Khan has heaped praise on Jim Cornette. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first... This past Friday night, WWE held SmackDown live from Madison Square Garden in New York City on the eve of 9/11. In the build-up to the show, SmackDown superstar Zelina Vega would pay tribute to her father, Michael Angel Trinidad, who was killed during the attacks in 2001 on the World Trade Center. Zelina, real name Tia, was set to wrestle in the Garden, going as far as to having custom ring gear made in honor of her late father, with the timing and location being the perfect place to pay tribute. She was scheduled to wrestle on the show, teaming with Carmella to take on Toni Storm and Liv Morgan in a tag team match. This according to John Pollock of Post Wrestling, before the match was scrapped last minute due to time constraints. Fightful have also added that the match was pulled during the show itself. Zelina has reacted to the situation on Twitter, posting photos of the custom ring gear that she had made with the caption, "Never mind." WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley responded to the photos and sent out his thoughts to Vega and said, "So Tia Trinidad's match was cut for time at the Garden on the eve of 9/11. That hurts me. I can only imagine how Tia felt. Stay strong, my friend." This is not a great look for WWE whatsoever, particularly leaving it so late in the day, leaving it until during the show to inform her that the match had been cut. It's no doubt a moment she would have been looking forward to all day, and it's pretty heartless of them to say the least. Every time I begin to find things to praise WWE for, they do stuff like this. Current AEW Women's World Championship #1 contender Ruby Soho recently spoke with Sports Illustrated following her Casino Battle Royal victory at AEW All Out. Ruby's victory would take place on her AEW debut, and she would hear her name chanted before she was even revealed as the mystery participant in the match. In the interview, Ruby spoke of AEW and the reaction from the crowd and said, "I fell back in love with professional wrestling at All Out. I was elated. These people accepted me. They understood me. They understood my journey. That gave me a fire I haven't felt in a long time. These people were ready to see me thrive, and there is no better stage to do that than in AEW. It's been a long journey with a lot of bumps in the road, but I'm here to make my destiny. I've had my share of insecurities and doubt, but if it weren't for the fans, I wouldn't be here. They saw something in me and they wanted to see more, and they're going to get the best of me in AEW." Ruby would go on to reveal that she'd been a fan of the AEW product for a long time and spoke of her choice to join the company following her release and said, "Choosing AEW wasn't a difficult decision. I had been a fan of AEW long before I left WWE. I could sense there was something very special and very different about this company. Now that I'm here, I'm beginning to realize it was the home I have always been searching for. This is where I belong, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to be here." Ruby is set to challenge AEW Women's World Champion Britt Baker at some point in the future, likely at the Arthur Ashe Stadium show in just under 2 weeks' time. Two highly touted prospects from the WWE Performance Center have been given new names ahead of their eventual NXT debuts, likely coming up following the rebrand of the show. Parker Bordeaux, who has had a lot of buzz surrounding him due to comparisons with Brock Lesnar, will now go by the name of Gunnar Harland, a name WWE filed to trademark on September 7th. Parker was an offensive linesman for the University of Central Florida and caught the eye of Paul Heyman on social media before signing with the company in February. Another talent to receive a new name is Bronson Reichsteiner, who is the son of wrestling legend Rick Steiner, who will now go by the name of Rex Steiner. And is it just me, or is that hard to say? It's now just a matter of time before Vince McMahon gets his hands on him and turns him into a green dinosaur. Both men very much fit the vision of the new NXT, that being homegrown big men, with both likely getting strong pushes out of the gate. No official debut dates have been revealed, but they did appear recently on NXT as security during a segment between Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole. Next up, we have an update from the Wrestling Observer regarding recent talks between CM Punk and WWE before he signed for AEW this year. In the Observer newsletter, it was noted that Fox, who of course airs SmackDown on Friday nights, had pushed for WWE to sign Punk. Fox and Punk are said to have a great relationship thanks to his time on their WWE Backstage show, which was produced by Fox rather than WWE. WWE initially ruled out the signing due to how expensive the move would be, before Fox offered to help fund the deal. The promotion once again refused due to other issues, such as attitude problems. Punk did address talks earlier this month suggesting his return would have been at this year's Royal Rumble, leading to a WrestleMania main event, likely against Roman Reigns. Punk told WWE not to play games, then claimed that they did just that. The report also noted that AEW and Punk began to talk money and storylines in February-March of this year, although they had been talking in general for a long time. It was also said that his debut at the United Center in Chicago was Punk's idea, and both parties agreed to keep it unannounced whilst making it as obvious as possible. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you drop a like on the video as it helps me out a lot, and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head, hopefully, towards 100,000 subscribers. But now, let's press play on the video. Next, we have more from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, as it appears that another big WWE contract is coming to an end. Whilst the exact date is unknown, Sami Zayn could become a free agent before the end of the year. That's of course if he decides not to re-sign with the company. There is no word on if Sami plans to stick around or pursue avenues outside of WWE, where he is known for his portrayal of El Generico, a masked luchador built from Tijuana, Mexico. This news follows reports that Sami's real-life best friend Kevin Owens' deal is also coming to an end, in his case in January 2020. His original deal was to end in early 2023 before the contract was restructured during the pandemic. In an update from The Observer, Owens' deal will end on January 31st next year, which is in just over 20 weeks' time. Perhaps we could see a reunion of El Generico and Kevin Steen outside of WWE, with Kevin heavily teasing a move to AEW on social media as of late. While Sami has joked that Generico was killed by the cartel, I'd love to see the character revived should he decide to move elsewhere. He does indeed own the rights to the gimmick and has sporadically sold El Generico merchandise on Pro Wrestling Tees whilst under contract with WWE, although none is currently available as of this recording. And finally, ever since the inception of All Elite Wrestling, their most prominent critic has been former wrestling promoter and manager Jim Cornette, who reviews the shows on his 2 weekly podcasts. AEW president Tony Khan, somebody who Cornette has been heavily critical of, spoke with Busted Open Radio this week to discuss Jim's opinions of AEW, and in fact heaped a ton of praise on the podcaster, even saying that his opinions are often fair. And he said, to be fair to him, these are his opinions. He says what he thinks, and there is stuff on the show that he's liked before, and there's stuff he hasn't liked. And I think he's still like that. He's not saying he loves everything on the show, but he has acknowledged a lot of great stuff that happened. What really tickled me, and I thought this was very cool, was his line about CM Punk's arrival, about his debut appearance in AEW on The First Dance. And I'll never forget, his exact quote was, "Well, it wasn't what I would have done, it was a lot better, it was perfect." I thought that was awesome, and it was very fair because I think it was our perfect moment. And it was very cool of him to say. He has been very fair recently with the stuff he said, and I think that's great. Khan would go on to admit that he has admired Cornette since he was a kid, and even said that he likely wouldn't be in the position he is without him. And he said, "I really admire him and have looked up to him since I was a small kid. I don't know if I would be doing this without him because, you know, there are no textbooks on how to be a wrestling promoter. There are no college classes for it. When I was going to school, when I was going to the University of Illinois Laboratory High School, and then the University of Illinois for college, those interviews he used to do, he would sit around for 4+ hours with the smart fans talking, and guys would tape it with a camcorder." Whilst the majority of AEW fans hate Cornette and the majority of Cornette fans hate AEW, it's nice to see that there is perhaps some unlikely peace at the end of the tunnel. Jim has recently said on his podcast that he doesn't hate Tony Khan the person, and has thanked him for AEW's response to the death of Bobby Eaton, his former managerial client and one half of the Midnight Express. This may be controversial and I don't think it will ever happen, but I honestly wouldn't mind seeing Cornette in AEW. Can you imagine the heat that he'd draw for for himself and whoever his client or clients would be. He'd also be a good producer, and whilst he's not always right about AEW, he's also not always wrong. I think for now though, AEW have decided to hand the Jim Cornette role to Dan Lambert, so that spot seems to be filled, at least for now. And before you go, make sure you check out my updated list where I discuss the top 10 AEW debuts of all time.